Good morning. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Hubbard. I am the Inspector Instructor for 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. The United States Marine Corps, in partnership with the City of Cleveland, presents the Marine Week Cleveland Speaker Series, which will bring senior Marine Corps leadership to Cleveland to discuss current relevant topics to the nation. Starting in February and continuing through Marine Week Cleveland in June, the Speaker Series will focus on a variety of issues, including the ongoing operations in Afghanistan, NATO in the 21st century, diversity, the next chapter of space exploration, as well as leadership skills from the combat zone to the classroom, and innovative medical developments assisting our returning wounded warriors. I am very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Brigadier General Vincent R. Stewart. As the Director of Intelligence, Brigadier General Stewart is responsible for the plans, programming, budgets, and staff supervision of intelligence and supporting activities within the United States Marine Corps. The General oversees a staff that is accountable for geospatial intelligence, advanced geospatial intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence, counterintelligence, and assures there is a single synchronized strategy for the development of Marine Corps intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance enterprise. After commissioning and graduation from the basic school and the Armor Course in 1982, he was ordered to 1st Marine Division in Camp Pendleton, California, for assignment with Tank Battalion, 1st Marine Division, as a tank platoon commander and later as the executive officer. During the next 3 decades, Brigadier General Stewart would serve in more than a dozen assignments, ranging from a commanding officer in the 2nd Radio Battalion at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to commanding officer, 1st Intel Battalion, Camp Pendleton, California, and commanding officer of Headquarters Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. In summer of 2009, Brigadier General Stewart assumed duties as the U.S. Marine Corps Director of Intelligence. General Stewart has 2 master's degrees, National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College and Natural Resource Strategy from the Industrial College of the Armed Forces. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you Brigadier General Stewart.
I'm always kind of curious who they're talking about when they read that stuff, because I don't recognize most of it. I'm going to try to do something different this morning than I normally do, and I spent a little bit of time preparing some remarks, because normally I don't like being behind the podium. I like to get out and talk to people. And but I think this is important enough that I capture the sentiment. So I actually did some prepared remarks, and I'll walk through them, I think. Or I could get inspired and just start talking, which I much prefer to do. What I'm going to talk a little bit about this morning is the African-American contribution to national defense, what the author Moore calls an admirable legacy of loyalty and patriotism. And I'll try to do it in a way that talks a little bit about our Marine Corps and what we bring to the national defense in terms of diversity and opportunity for our African-American partners. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Major Jackson, Mayor Elliott, thank you for giving me the opportunity this morning and for the gracious reception here today. I come first of all bringing greetings from our Commandant of the Marine Corps, who has declared among his primary objectives that our Corps remains the premier expeditionary force in readiness, organized, trained, and equipped to rapidly respond to crises wherever our nation calls, whenever the President directs. That our Corps will represent the best ideals of this great nation, and that we will have a Corps that attracts the very best of America's youth and reflects the rich diversity of this nation. We will never compromise our standards, demanding only the highest in soldierly virtue that you all recognize as synonymous with our Corps. Come on in. If I get this right, I think this is Tom Austin. I am the Director of Intelligence for a reason. Good morning, Tom. Welcome. On a personal level, I am truly honored to be among you this morning in this great American city. I thought I was going to insert here something like, well, it's not Chicago, but it still is a great American city. I'm a Chicagoan. I'm a Chicago. I know I'd probably get booed if I said that, so just disregard that I even mentioned that. And it's an honor to share this room with some of the real heroes of our nation. I'm going to talk this morning about what Christopher Moore called the admirable legacy of loyalty and patriotism displayed by African Americans throughout the history of this nation. This morning, I have the honor of acknowledging and recognizing some of the true heroes of this nation. We have here this morning two of our Tuskegee Airmen. Roy Richardson from the 100th Fighting Squadron. And Thomas Austin of the 99th Fighter Squadron. As you know, these Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American military aviators in the United States Armed Forces. And as I mentioned to Roy this morning, they didn't simply open the doors to integrating the Air Force. They absolutely kicked the door in. And they performed magnificently. And you'll see and hear more about the Tuskegee Airmen in the days ahead. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our Montford Point Marines who are not here, but I'll talk a little bit about our Montford Point Marines, our first African Americans to serve in the modern Marine Corps. We're also honored this morning to have the counselors here this morning. I told them I get emotional talking about Marines. I get emotional talking about two things. I get emotional talking about my mother, and I get emotional talking about Marines. And the counselors there are Gold Star families. And they represent Sergeant Counselor who gave the ultimate sacrifice in the defense of our nation in Afghanistan. And I'm truly honored to be here with you. Thank you, and God bless. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the first African American who entered the Corps at Montford Point, North Carolina. While some of these men chose to be pioneers by enlisting, others joined simply to serve their country. Collectively, they established within our Corps a tradition of sacrifice and duty that continues today in the thousands of black Marines and officers and enlisted, men and women alike, who wear the Eagle Globe and Anchor. Today, our Corps is more diverse than at any time in our history. At stations and bases here in the United States and overseas, at sea aboard amphibious ships, and in combat zones such as Helmand Province in Afghanistan, African American Marines serve with distinction and pride as ever before. Last summer, we honored the pioneering black generals and admirals and senior executives in the Department of the Navy at a ceremony at the Pentagon. As I sat in the audience and listened to the remarks of the speakers, it was impossible for me to not be filled with a tremendous sense of pride at the accomplishments of all African Americans who have served this great nation. Men and women who have answered the call of freedom, justice, fairness, and equality. Men and women who, even when our nation did not recognize them as equals, fought for the right to defend, fight, and die for the democratic ideals of this nation. From the revolutionary days through our current conflict, and it occurred to me in a powerful way that not only were we carrying on this great and admirable legacy of service, but that the story of these men and women who served have not yet been fully told. Picture, if you would, the days leading up to the American Revolution, the discussion about casting off the yoke of oppression, a dictatorial king who would dare to suppress liberty. Think, if you will, the American slaves, hearing the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's against this backdrop that African Americans fought on both sides. During that same tribute in last year, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus described the Navy's Golden 13, the first African Americans to attend Naval Recruit Officer training. They made us all think about the Marines' own trailblazers. Officers like Frederick Branch, the first black officer in our Corps, who prior to completing OCS had completed Montford Point. Similar to the Navy's Golden 13, the Marines had special men about whom many of you may not know, but whose legacy is equally important to the rich history of African Americans in service to country and in response to the Corps' mission. During the Revolutionary War, there were 13 black men who served in the Continental Marines. While we find very few names of these Marines, Isaac Walker was one of these, and he was recruited by one of our Marine recruiters, Robert Mullen. Captain Mullen was one of the founding officers of the Continental Marines. His family ran Tun Tavern, the famous public house and restaurant in colonial Philadelphia, recognized by all Marines today as the birthplace of our Corps. Turn the clock forward to 1941. President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, establishing the Fair Employment Practice Commission, thus open up all services to blacks. Similar to Isaac Walker during the Revolution, a new crop of daring men steps forth in the modern era, leaving their families and their communities across America to join in World War II's struggle. These were the first African Americans to serve their nation as Marines since the American Revolution. They came from the North and the South, from all walks of life. They came for different reasons. Some wanted a challenge of being Marines. Some wanted to earn a living. Others came to prove their mettle, to prove once and for all that they belonged. But they all came, answering the call of patriotism to protect and to serve their country that had come under attack. And they served with dignity, they served gallantly, and they served honorably. Men like Hashmark Johnson, John Pridgeon, George Jackson had prior service in the military. They simply wanted to be Marines. Others like Charles Anderson, Charles Simmons were college graduates. Some of them had never experienced segregation before. They didn't believe that they had heard what they had heard until they experienced segregation and discrimination in Union Station in Washington, D.C., or on the buses on the way to Jacksonville, North Carolina. Others discovered that some levels of discrimination went away with the Marine uniform, when white Marines stood by their side to get them a seat on a bus or at a restaurant. But all of them had one thing in common about their entry into the training camp to become Marines. They all went through Montford Point, and it was hard. They were challenged harder than their white counterparts who joined the Corps in the 40s, and they became legends of our Corps. For 7 years, from 1942 to 1949, 20,000 young black men departed Montford Point as Marines. Their story and their struggle for equality and acceptance in the Corps did not end when they left Montford Point. It had just begun. They weren't allowed to become infantrymen or to serve in other mainstream military occupational specialties. Rather, most were assigned to segregated 51st and 52nd Defense Battalions, or reported for duty as stewards and units to serve meals to white officers. The two defense battalions were largely gun batteries and aircraft artillery outfits. Although skilled in their gunnery and well led, these two defense battalions largely saw no action in the Marshall Islands and on Guam, where they were employed in the Pacific Theater. These decisions greatly disappointed these Marines, who wanted nothing more than to serve their country and do their duties. They wanted to carry out that noble Marine ethos, that warrior ethos they had earned the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. It's ironic, but the Marines from Montford Point who saw the most action in World War II were those assigned to segregated ammunition and depot companies, units whose jobs were to speed supplies to the frontline units engaged in combat with the Japanese during the island hopping campaign. To resupply the front lines, these men often had to fight their way to the front and then carry back wounded Marines, black and white, to the rear for medical care. The Montford Point Marines demonstrated their mettle during vicious and bloody fighting in places like Saipan and Okinawa. Their courage under fire, fidelity to their fellow Marines, regardless of skin color, began to erode the cruel and false generalization stereotype within the Corps at the time that blacks could not and would not fight. In the face of danger, these Marines persevered and acquitted themselves on the battlefields. In 1944, General Vandergrift, then the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Medal of Honor recipient, and a hero of Guadalcanal, had observed the courage of black Marines in hand-to-hand combat on the island of Saipan. And he said, in one of the most profound statements in our Corps, "The experiment with Negro Marines is over. They are Marines, period." The close of World War II and the dawning of integration within the service during the 50s saw African Americans serving alongside and in some cases in charge of white Marines. Their courage now unquestioned. They were being awarded Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Navy Crosses for combat and valor in Korea and at Busan and elsewhere. In Vietnam, there was no shortage of heroic acts. In fact, 5 Medals of Honor, our nation's highest award, were awarded to African Americans. All of them for selfless acts to save others' lives, not just black lives or white lives, but simply Marine lives. Last November, in an act that was long in coming, our president signed into legislation the Congressional Gold Medal recognizing the service of our Montford Point Marines. For many of the years here, we have a Corps who treasures and values our history so much, and yet written out of the history was a contribution of our Montford Point Marines and our African Americans who served. And with that legislation last November, we corrected and recognized the tremendous contribution and put our Montford Point Marines on the same footing as the Golden 13, the Buffalo Soldiers, the Tuskegee Airmen, and all those young men and women who committed their lives and their effort to this great nation. The signing of this legislation awarded to the Montford Point Marines in recognition of their personal sacrifice and service to their country, a long overdue recognition. Today, African Americans serve this nation and our Corps with distinction. They serve in all units, in every element of our Marine Air Ground Task Force. They command at every level, from division command to the smallest tactical formations. They advise the Commandant of the Marine Corps as well as the President of the United States. And they are measured by one simple criteria: that they meet the highest standards of United States Marines. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a tremendous legacy of service, not just in our Corps, from our African American community. Throughout the history of this great nation, from the Revolutionary period, through the Indian Wars, through the Mexican Wars, through World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, men of all color have answered our nation's call, have recognized the importance of liberty and freedom and justice for all men all over this globe. I've watched these Marines on every continent serve this nation, helping the people of this world, the people who are hopeless, the people who are poor. I've watched them dig wells. I've watched them build homes. I've watched them build places of worship. I've watched them teach democracy around the world. I've watched them express the ideas of freedom. I've watched them bring people into the valley of hope, where they've asked people to believe in the great ideals of this nation. And for so many of the years of this nation, our African Americans were denied some of those same liberties and freedoms, but they persisted and persevered. And they always, ladies and gentlemen, understood that this was about their nation. They were as much American as anyone else, and they wanted to do their part. We have come a long way. We have generals in the Marine Corps who wear stars. That's phenomenal. That is not trivial. Oftentimes we see general officers and we think, yeah, it's probably a big deal. It's cool he got there. I still wrestle with whether I got there yet. But today in our Marine Corps, we have general officers of all race, all ethnicity, all genders. We walk through the ranks of our Marine Corps today and we see sergeants running platoons, sergeants majors running the Marine Corps, and at every level we continue to love this country and will die in the defense of this nation and in the ideals of this nation. That is the legacy that we inherited. That is the legacy that we'll carry forward. We are committed as ever to all of the greatness of America. Let me tell you something else. I've been asked a number of times why I do this. I joined the Marine Corps with the intent of doing 3 years. And I was going to do 3 years and leave the Marine Corps and go off and get rich somewhere. Well, I ain't rich. I can't think of any better decision I have ever made than to join the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has filled me with a sense of purpose. It has taught me more leadership than I could ever possibly imagine, having learned anywhere else. It has taken me to every corner of this world, except the Antarctic, and I'm not signing up for that one. It has had a sense of humor because it has sent me to Adak, Alaska, which was a grueling 2 years. But we serve because we love this country. There's so many things that we talk about in this country in a negative way. And we fail to recognize just how great this country is. all of its warts, all of its faults, there is no greater country, no better place on earth to live and to grow. When you think about this, think about a kid who comes from Jamaica, comes to this country as a young teenager, and not because of his family wealth, not because of any line of succession, not because of any great intellect, but by hard work is able to raise himself up to be a general officer in the greatest fighting force the world has ever known. There is no country on the face of the earth where that is possible. For an immigrant to come to that country and rise to the top of his or her profession through nothing but hard work and a little bit of dedication. That's America. And every one of us may take that for granted if we wish. But we could not, none of us could accomplish what we've accomplished anywhere else. We've got some faults in this great country. But when we all stand together and we work together, we can accomplish anything we set our sights on. So I am honored to follow in the lines of all those young men and women who served before, who all served this nation with one cause, that ideal, that principle, democracy, with all that comes with that, our personal responsibility and our personal hope in the pursuit of happiness. And I thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to special program featuring Brigadier General Vincent R. Stewart, Director of Intelligence for the United States Marine Corps. We will return momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speakers now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here, especially those who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We hope all of you will join us in March as the City of Cleveland and the City Club and Marine Week Cleveland celebrate Women's History Month in March. The Marine Week Cleveland Speaker Series has selected relevant topics with leading subject matter experts who will bring an important diversity to the Marine Corps General Officer ranks. Please join the Speaker Series in March for discussions on combat leadership and the role of women in the U.S. military. If you wish to make reservations for next week's program or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We are pleased to present this program with the support of several partners, including Mayor Jackson, Mayor Elliott, the City of Cleveland, the City of Brook Park, the City Club of Cleveland, Marine Week Cleveland, and many, many others. Now, we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including our guest. Holding our microphone today, there we go, is City Club Program Director Carrie Miller. Now for our first question.
Can I lay down some ground rules? No hard questions. Softballs only, please.
It seems to me that the military has a lot to teach the private sector about how to create a culture of diversity and inclusion. To what do you attribute the fact that the military sort of seems to be leading the private sector, and what can we in the private sector do to emulate the military's model?
You know, we draw from the private sector for the principles of leadership. I think where we really hone the leadership skills is because of the nature of what we do. There are no second chances. There are no do-overs on the battlefield if you get it wrong. If you don't lead men with courage and conviction and you're not professional about what you do, you don't get a do-over. So we really emphasize that because the most precious resource that we have isn't the guns and the battleships and all those things. It's the men and women that we have in our formations. So we can't get that wrong. The price is too high. And so the things that are written, all the things we know about leadership, we read from textbooks that are published by industry and by leaders of in industry. But the difference is, in our industry, you may lose $1 billion, and that sounds like a lot. We don't want to lose one Marine, and so we've got to get that leadership bit right. We don't get to replay it and say, yeah. So I don't know how you. I think all of there's just a sense. There's just a sense of this is just one team that has to succeed. And so I think we place a tremendously high premium on the fact that we're going to put folks in harm's way, and there's no turning back if we do it wrong. And so I guess if industry or the civilian private sector has the same passion that we have, that you can't get this wrong, and there are plenty in the industry. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jack Welch. Jack Welch talks about being number one or two in what you do. And cut off the bottom tier, and puts a pretty high demand on leadership and senior leadership. So I think there's plenty to be said for private sector and what they, and there are plenty of great examples in the private sector. I think, though, more fundamental than anything else is the fact that we know we can't get it wrong. We love our Marines, so we ain't gonna let anything too bad happen to them. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but there's just no do-overs.
I have a question, and it's mostly geared towards education.
Yeah.
And there is a huge problem with education in this country that disproportionately affects minorities than it does other sections of the population. How do you continue to build diversity and address this issue and still, and I guess I'm still formulating the question a little bit, but how do you address that issue and build diversity at the same time within the Marines and the military?
I remember growing up in Chicago in high school thinking I was going to be a professional football player. And it struck me many years later how misguided I was because so few actually made it. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time studying in high school because I was going to be a professional football player. So the emphasis far too often are on the wrong things. We don't emphasize the basics, and we don't demand excellence within our school systems, and we don't hold, this will get me in trouble, we don't hold parents accountable. My son is a teacher in Maryland in high school, and he loves what he does, except he's incredibly frustrated because he has a sense that he is a high-paid and not so high-paid babysitter. That our parents aren't committed to the education of their children and aren't emphasizing and holding them as responsible as they expect the teachers to hold them responsible. So we've got some work to do in our education system, going all the way back to the early portions of the education spectrum, teaching basics, teaching fundamentals, emphasizing critical thinking skills from an early age, and seriously committing to responsibility, personal and parental responsibility. And the emphasis has got to get back to, you ain't going to be a basketball player, so forget about it.
General to move
I'm
from
sorry, somebody out here as a kid is going to be a basketball player, and I wish him luck. I wish he's the first round draft choice and comes to Cleveland and wins a championship.
We need him. The other side of the military is when you come out of the military, and I think there's an increasing sense that we have not done enough for not just our wounded warriors, but even just the regular guys and gals that are coming out of the military and then rejoining civilian life. And then in addition to that, the family aspects of service. The men and women go sometimes to places far away and they leave families back home. So can you talk a little bit about both those aspects of what service means and what the Marine Corps is doing to support families during service and ease or improve the transition as they exit?
There's a campaign called Joining Forces Campaign. The intent, the initiative is to mobilize all sectors of society to understand what we bring when we come out of the Marine Corps and take off the uniform. It's hard to convert. I was a tank armor mechanic to something that translates on a civilian resume. And so this Joining Forces campaign is intended to give service members and their families opportunities to support Marines and service members broadly, quite frankly, as they come out of the service. We understand that this is important. We have put a great bit of effort in reaching out to communities, just like we're reaching out here in Cleveland. And I'm being careful here because I don't want to be critical too much. We certainly can do a whole lot more. We owe it to our service members as they leave service to ensure that they have a graceful transition. They've sacrificed a good bit. They've moved their families around sometimes, countless times, and we don't always help them with the transition. So the Marine Corps has been actively involved in engaging across the community to explain who we are, what we do, and how we can contribute. We talked a little bit about the leadership skills. That alone is priceless. I mean, it's absolutely priceless. There's no better leadership training than leading a Marine platoon or company or a battalion. So we've got to do a much better job of showing the American public the strengths and the things that we bring and help our Marines transition. There are 270 companies, if I remember correctly, that are part of the Logistics Association, for instance, that we've made contact with to integrate our Marines or transition them much better. The President, I'm looking for the numbers here, has challenged the private sector to hire 100,000 military spouses and veterans by 2013. And this is one of the key initiatives of the administration and the First Lady. And so we embrace all the effort to connect with industry. And we're working very hard we just started a program, in fact, I'm trying to think of the transition program to help our Marines better prepare for transition, because that's part of it. We have not done that very well. We've not set up the institutions that will allow them to prepare transition for civilian world, and so we're starting to do that, and we're actually requiring Marines to do these transition seminars. But there's much to be done.
You talked a lot about telling the story of the role that African Americans have played in the military throughout history. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics of how you work to build diversity in the Marine Corps, the importance of it, and then, now that we're seeing budget cuts, because it costs money to make sure that you have the right people in place, what that's going to mean for the ability to build diversity?
Once we got past this notion that African Americans wouldn't serve or wouldn't fight, for us, diversity was you got through boot camp, you got through officer candidate school, you are a Marine. Now, we went through some things where people, you're a dark green Marine, you're a light green Marine, and all that nonsense, but at the heart of it, we were Marines at that point. And the challenge then becomes, how do you go out and find enough in numbers? And quite frankly, on the enlisted side, we've done extremely well. We're at about 12% on the enlisted side, which is about the average for the population. And on the officer side, we've had a great challenge in recruiting a sufficient number of officers. I think we're now at about 6%, and we're working our tail off to get, in order to get one officer to rise to my level, you need about 100 entry-level officer a session. And we've been getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 or 70. For some reason, and we've got to figure this out, for some reason, most middle-class African Americans don't see the Marine Corps as the place to go to create opportunities for them in the future. They think about the high-tech field of the Air Force. They think about the wider array of skill sets in the Army. And it's just, we haven't found the magic yet to appeal to enough young men that we are going to teach them everything that the Air Force could teach them. We're the only service that has all the components wrapped up in one. So we got the high-tech skills. We've got to advertise that better. We've got the leadership skills. We've got, hell, you got a guy as director of intelligence for the Marine Corps. I don't know how the heck that happened, but you can do almost anything in the Marine Corps. But we have not had that great appeal to the middle-class African-American men and women. And so we're working our tails off to fix that, to get out there and with the outreach programs and get those numbers up this year. We made great progress last year, and we continue to work to find young men and women who want to become officers. But on the enlisted side, we're in pretty good shape. And there is no, I've been doing this for 31 years now, and there is no color issue in the Marine Corps today. There really isn't.
Thank you, ma'am. General, just a question. In terms of pride in your institution and the military in general, I noticed that General Barry McCafferty in some of his presentations likes to point out that the top of public support in terms of confidence in an institution is the military. I would like to ask you, how do you, in the future, see leadership, evolving? Changes in leadership, what they'll need to do to, understand the technologies or the trends that you see. Thank you.
Probably, I remember General Patton talking about the war is not going to be the same. Long-range artillery and long-range missile, and it's not personal and it's not leadership. And he moaned the fact that the face-to-face combat was going away and the personal leadership on the battlefield because we have these long-range strikes. And you could move forward now to drone attacks and the remoteness of combat. But I don't know that it's going to change much. Because at the end of the day, you still will need men and women who will go unto, and it's not just about combat. It's about the entire range of military operations. It's humanitarian assistance operations. It's non-combatant evacuations from embassies around the world as our citizens find themselves in harm's way. We often talk about the military in terms of combat because that's the high end of what we do. But there's such a vast amount of things that we do. A Marine Expeditionary Unit is certified on 26 different missions, from rescuing American citizens abroad, providing aid and relief to distressed nation. There was a period of time here about 2 years ago, we had Marines fully engaged in combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had them doing disaster relief in Pakistan. We had them doing humanitarian operations in Haiti after the earthquake, and everything in between. All of those things require all of the same leadership skill sets. So regardless of how remote warfare itself might become in the future, there's a whole panoply of things that military folks do, short of high-end combat operations that will require the same leadership skills and the same commitment. I'll tell you something else, because I'm in a Marine audience. I started to say this to the counselors earlier. We get some pretty damn good folks in the Marine Corps. You know, we get some really good folks in the Marine Corps. And I don't say that because the Army or the Navy or the Air Force doesn't get good folks. They get good folks too. But there's a certain calling to be a Marine. It's a different group of folks that go to the Marine recruiter and go, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? Of course, the recruiter says, yeah, come on in. But it's a different kind of folk. And they come in with an incredible, now we do some work with them once they get to boot camp, mind you. Because the folks who go into boot camp are the raw material, and they come out very different individuals. But they have such great pride in the uniform that they wear, the history of our Corps, and I've watched them work their tails off to never tarnish the image of our Marine Corps. So every once in a while you hear that we do something silly, and there are a couple of guys who do some things that are silly, but that's not the norm. Our Marines are incredible American citizens, and you might guess I love them to death. So I'm glad we had some Marines here. So I didn't recognize you all this morning because I didn't think you wanted me to draw attention to you, but there you have it.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a special program featuring Brigadier General Vincent R. Stewart, Director of Intelligence for the United States Marine Corps. Thank you, General Stewart, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.